What you are about to witness is not a simple historical account. It is the post-mortem of a civilization that tore itself open to diagnose its own sickness. The conclusions were so psychologically cataclysmic, so ruinous to the comforting myths we spin about devotion and commitment, that they were locked away for 100 years, judged far too volatile for public consumption. But today, we cracked the vault. In the minutes to come, you will be handed a cipher. A cipher tempered in the decadent inferno of 1920s Germany that decodes the brutal, unadulterated reality of why women betray you and are the first to exit. This is the chronicle of the Wimmer Protocol. And by the conclusion of this series, you will hold a perspective through which all contemporary female conduct becomes not merely foreseeable, but utterly clear. Before we start, if you are committed to genuine self-development, not just the soothing falsehoods, but the severe, unpolished truth, then you will gain true worth from my ebook, The Black Book of Human Nature. It is a functional guide that deconstructs the censored realities of human conduct, equipping you with the means to at last comprehend yourself and the world on a more profound level. The link awaits in the pinned comment. Conceive of a reality where all you have trusted is false. The foundation under you has vanished. The heavens above are collapsing. And the money in your wallet is not simply without value, but a cruel joke. This was the Weimar Republic in the early 1920s. Not a country, but a laboratory, a petri dish of human instinct, where every rule of civilized conduct was voided. The Great War had been forfeited. The emperor had abdicated, and a punitive treaty had forced crippling reparations, hurling Germany into an economic void. But from this void, something remarkable was born. It was not solely political anarchy. It was a social and psychological detonation. For a short, brilliant, and horrifying span, the disguises were discarded. The social compacts that had directed conduct for ages, the silent pacts concerning obligation, fidelity, and affection, were incinerated as kindling for pure survival. And in this unparalleled setting, a collective of sociologists, psychologists, and ethnographies, many linked to the renowned Institute for Psychology, the Frankfurt School, started a covert operation. They were not researching economics or governance. They were researching women. They observed. They recorded. They performed countless interviews and questionnaires, assembled information on matrimony, separation, adultery, and partner selection with a cold, analytical rigor typically saved for laboratory animals. Their objective was straightforward: to comprehend the essential character of female loyalty once the synthetic structures of society, wealth, standing, and security were totally and absolutely eradicated. They named their compiled results the Wimmer Protocol. And what they uncovered would have made Darwin recoil. They found the raw evolutionary script for female behavior, a script that functions on a delay, concealed under the veneer of our modern, comfortable existence. It is the script that clarifies with unnerving precision why she gazed into your eyes and vowed you eternity only to be boxing her possessions half a year later when a superior alternative appeared. It clarifies the silent exits, the branch swinging, the calm, premeditated departure plans that leave men bewildered and devastated, condemning themselves for a contest whose regulations they were never given. Let me illustrate a scenario for you, not with wide historical sweeps, but with a narrative. A narrative of a man we shall name Ernst. Ernst was a war hero. He had battled in the mud, earned an Iron Cross, and returned to Berlin in 1919 with a torso of medals and a spirit of optimism. He wed his beloved Greta. He secured a decent, steady position as a mid-level manager at a printing press. He executed everything society had instructed him to do. He was dependable, principled, and faithful. He furnished a respectable middle-class existence. For a handful of years it succeeded. They had happiness, they had a modest flat, they visited the cinema, envisioned a family. This was the life he had battled for. But then the hyperinflation struck. By 1923, his life's labor, his reserves, his stability vaporized in a span of weeks. His wage, paid daily, was literally transported in a wheelbarrow. One day he went to purchase a loaf of bread with his entire day's earnings. He left the wheelbarrow outside briefly, and when he came back, the cash remained, but the wheelbarrow was stolen. That is not merely an anecdote. It was a fact. His lifetime of savings could not purchase a postage stamp. And Greta, the woman who had sworn her loyalty to him in a church she transformed, dependable provider she had married had vanished, substituted by a man who was in the new ruthless calculus of Weimar, a failure. She did not depart him for another man instantly. First, she merely became remote. The happiness vanished. Then, she began visiting the new dance halls, the Tons Pesta, without him. She needed to feel vibrant. She claimed she needed to flee the despair. Then one Tuesday, she was simply gone. A letter on the kitchen counter. She had departed with a black market profiteer, a man who traded in solid currency, in contraband items, a man who symbolized survival. Burns was stranded with his worthless metals in a broken world. He had followed the antiquated script, and it had resulted in betrayal and desertion. His narrative was not unusual. The Weimar Protocol recorded thousands of errants. The information demonstrated a staggering, indisputable link. As a man's capacity to supply stable, superior resources disintegrated, his partner's perceived loyalty crumbled in almost perfect unison. This was not concerning love in the abstract. It was concerning survival in the tangible. The data from the protocol is startling in its detail. One long-term study followed 500 married pairs from 1919 to 1925. In 1919, the divorce rate was a steady 12%. By the height of the hyperinflation in 1923, it had surged to over 65%. But the more telling data was in the instigators of those divorces. In over 82% of instances, it was the wife who initiated. The reasons listed in the legal documents were rarely, "he is a bad man." The most frequent reasons were incapacity to provide, inadequate home, and irreconcilable differences in life perspective, which the researchers noted cynically translated as a failure to adjust to the new economic reality. This is the cold, hard data that reflects your bewilderment today. Why did she depart? The Weimar sociologist would contend she did not leave you. She abandoned the circumstances you symbolized. In a stable society, those circumstances are hidden. In Weimar, they were exposed. Another study, a sequence of detailed interviews with women from every social stratum, posed a simple query. What are the 3 most vital traits in a husband? In 1919, the replies were good morals, shared religion, and dependability. By 1923, the top 3 replies were ingenuity, financial sense, and social links. Good morals had vanished from the list completely. This is the ruthless pivot. This is the moment the disguise falls. This is the moment the cozy fantasy of unconditional love is consumed in the fire of hyperinflationary truth. The protocol disclosed that female loyalty is not an absolute quality. It is a contingent tactic. It is a vessel that demands a captain who can not only sail calm waters, but, more critically, survive a tempest. When the tempest arrives, and a tempest always arrives, whether it is a financial collapse, or personal emergency, or simply the gradual decay of your social standing, that is when her loyalty is authentically examined. And the data from the most extreme laboratory in modern history implies that most men fail that test. Not because they are feeble, but because they are competing by a rule book that has been outdated for a century. But it was not solely about currency. The Weimar Protocol excavated further into the psychological and cultural decay that hastened this procedure. This was the age of the Neue Frau, the new woman. She cropped her hair, smoked, wore shorter dresses, and refused the Victorian homemaker model. She was sexually free, financially self-reliant or aspiring to be, and openly disdainful of traditional masculinity. She viewed as feeble and outdated, the masculinity that had lost the war and impoverished the nation. The cabarets of Berlin became the cathedrals of this new creed. On stage, performers sang lyrics ridiculing faithful husbands, applauding infidelity, and glorifying the hedonistic chase of pleasure. The culture itself was actively incentivizing disloyalty and penalizing stability. It was a culture of ecstasy, but a frantic, hopeless, soul-devouring ecstasy that was the direct product of societal trauma. Consider the man who uncovers his wife's emotional affair with a colleague. He is shattered. He confronts her and she says the most perplexing thing. He simply understands me. He makes me feel vibrant. You're just so steady. What she is truly articulating is a line directly from the Weimar Cabaret. She is informing you that in the quiet, stable setting you have supplied her hypergamous instinct. The impulse to perpetually seek a superior, more thrilling, more vibrant feeling branch is being activated. Your stability has become your weakness. The Weimar data demonstrates that in eras of peace and prosperity, this instinct is inactive, dormant, but in eras of stress, chaos, or even perceived monotony, it awakens. It is an ancient survival mechanism shrieking that the present branch is decaying and a new, more lively one must be located. The men who prospered in Weimar, the men whom women like Greta deserted their urns for, were not the stable, reliable providers. They were the speculators, the artists, the criminals, the charismatic speakers, the men who emanated an aura of dominance, command, and mastery over the turmoil. They were the ones who comprehended that, in a disintegrating world, you do not proffer safety. You proffer a thrilling, potent journey on the ship of turmoil itself. This is the central, disquieting truth. The protocol starts to reveal. The loyal, stable, dependable man is the first to be betrayed when the world, or even just a woman's private world, starts to crumble. He is the victim of a biological imperative he never knew was real. We have only just started to scratch the surface of the Weimar data. We have witnessed the economic trigger and the cultural amplifier, but the most ruinous portion of the protocol is still ahead. The researchers did not halt at noting behavior. They proceeded to pinpoint the particular predictable psychological profile of the men who were most prone to be betrayed and deserted first. They devised a typology of male susceptibility, a catalog of traits that then and now function as a signal for abandonment. And more alarmingly, they pinpointed the exact moment in a woman's life, a biological and psychological junction, where the likelihood of her enacting this betrayal escalates to near inevitability. A moment they coldly labeled patronin de revolta, the matron's revolt. This is the intelligence that was deemed too unstable, too damaging to the social order to ever be disseminated. Now we will venture into the core of the protocol's most prohibited discoveries. We will disclose the 3 male archetypes fated for betrayal. Archetypes that are living among us today, wholly oblivious of their destiny. And we will reveal the exact age, the biological trigger that activates a woman's ultimate exit strategy. This is where the history ceases being a lecture and starts being a reflection. The initial discoveries of the Weimar Protocol were startling enough, exposing the ruthless economic and cultural calculus of female loyalty. But the researchers, in their cold, Germanic meticulousness, were not content with merely witnessing the storm. They desired to chart its very center. They advanced from the macro to the micro, from societal currents to the intimate, devastating specifics of individual psychology. They performed thousands of hours of clinical interviews, not just with the women who departed, but with the men who were stranded. They cross-referenced personality types, economic histories, and life stories, hunting for a pattern, a predictive model for betrayal, and they discovered it. The data merged into a grim taxonomy, a typology of male susceptibility that was as accurate as it was merciless. The protocol pinpointed 3 principal male archetypes, who in the absence of a rigid social order were almost destined for abandonment. These were not feeble men in the conventional sense. In many instances, they were the very men that the prior century had exalted as models of virtue. But in the laboratory of decay, their virtues had become fatal defects. Comprehending these archetypes is not an act of self-punishment. It is an act of strategic intelligence. It is the distinction between being a soldier who stumbles into a trap and a general who studies the enemy's strategy. The first and most plentiful archetype identified by the researchers was what they called Hund, the faithful hound. This man is the Ernst from our prior narrative. He is the reliable provider, the loyal companion, the man who trusts that consistency, integrity, and labor are the ultimate currencies of a relationship. He is the foundation. He takes pride in his stability, recalls anniversaries. He repairs items in the home. He is a good father. He obtains his sense of value from his steadfast commitment. And this, according to the Weimar data, is exactly his downfall. The protocol's interviews with women who had deserted such men revealed an astonishingly uniform refrain. They did not speak of animosity or even distaste. They spoke of a quiet, spirit-crushing tedium. They described a sensation of being smothered by predictability. One woman, a former housewife who left her civil servant spouse for a jazz musician, told the interviewers, "Being with Carl was like reading a book where you already know the ending. There were no shocks, no risk. I felt myself becoming a piece of furniture in my own life." The faithful hound commits the fatal mistake of believing his loyalty is a deposit in an emotional bank account gathering interest. He does not comprehend that in the feminine psyche, especially one conditioned by a culture of chaos like Weimar or our modern culture of social media and instant satisfaction. This very predictability registers as a lack of alternatives. It registers as weakness. Her hypergamous instinct, that ancient murmuring voice, starts to question if he is so loyal, so reliable, so accessible. Is it because no other woman desires him? Is his stability not a choice, but a testimony to his lack of worth in the wider marketplace? This is the most brutal paradox. The very traits he believes are his greatest assets become the origin of her scorn. The faithful hound is betrayed, not because he is a bad man, but because he is a tedious one. He fails to grasp that female desire is not ignited by comfort alone, but by the thrilling alternation between comfort and challenge, between safety and peril. He offers a flat line, and she craves a pulse. The second archetype, born directly from the aftermath of war and societal failure, was Debakir, the damaged warrior. This man is the veteran, the trauma survivor, the man who has gazed into the void and bears its shade in his eyes. He may wear medals on his chest. It is a wound he carries in his soul. The damaged warrior possesses a profound, authentic masculinity. He has faced genuine trials. He comprehends sacrifice. He can be intensely fervent and deeply profound. Women are often initially attracted to him with a potent, almost maternalistic zeal. They see a project. They see an injured lion they can mend. They're intoxicated by the potential they perceive buried under the pain. This is the hook. The attraction for her is in the potential, the fantasy of being the one woman unique enough to save him. But the Weimar data shows this is a fantasy with a brutally brief lifespan. The protocol's case studies are filled with such men. A former stormtrooper, tormented by the trenches, whose wife initially found his silent power and haunted gaze romantic. She viewed him as a tragic poet. But after years of his night terrors, his emotional remoteness, his incapacity to express his anguish, her mission of salvation became a duty. The initial attraction soured into bitterness. The very pain that rendered him deep and intriguing now rendered him distant and inaccessible. The researchers noted a critical juncture which they termed the exhaustion threshold. This was the moment the woman's emotional reserves for managing his trauma were exhausted. She grew weary of being cautious. She grew weary of the gloom. Her hypergamous instinct, ever practical, started to calculate. Is his depth worth the perpetual emotional cost? Does his strength offset for the fact that I am constantly performing the role of a therapist rather than a partner? And when a man who seems whole, unburdened, and able to providing light rather than absorbing it, enters her sphere, the damaged warrior is abandoned. His betrayal is framed as self-preservation on her part. I just could not save him. The reports uniformly quote, "I was sinking with him." He is left isolated with his wounds, doubly betrayed, first by the world that shattered him, and then by the woman who vowed to restore him. The third, and in many ways most treacherous archetype, was demoralische architect, the moral architect. This man is not tedious like the faithful hound, nor is he shattered like the damaged warrior. He is inflexible. He is a man of doctrine, of ideology, of unbending regulations. He believes in a fixed order to the world, be it religious, political, or philosophical. He is the staunch traditionalist who demands specific gender functions, the rigid intellectual who cannot stray from his creed, the man whose identity is constructed upon a base of being correct. In a stable society, his certainty can be appealing. It offers framework, but in a chaotic, fluid setting like Weimar, his rigidity became a death warrant. The protocol recorded the ascent of various political and religious movements and the men who adhered to them with zealous devotion. Their wives, however, were often navigating the actual world, a world of changing morals, economic hardship, and alluring new liberties. The moral architect would react to this chaos, not with adaptation, but with stricter control and more forceful declarations of his truth. This created a fundamental rift. A case study recounts a committed Communist Party member who expended all his time and funds on party leaflets and gatherings, while his wife and children starved. He was constructing a utopian future, but he was failing to supply for the present. When she left him for a shopkeeper who could actually provide food, he denounced her as a class traitor and slave to her instincts. He was so wedded to his ideology that he failed the fundamental primal test of a provider. He was correct, and he was solitary. The moral architect is betrayed because he ranks his abstract doctrines above her tangible reality. He offers a lecture when she requires a resolution. His loyalty is to a concept, not to the fluid, evolving, often chaotic human being beside him. Her departure is not just a hunt for a better provider. It is an escape from psychological confinement. She would prefer be mistaken and content in the arms of a pragmatic man than correct and wretched in the cold clutch of an ideology. But the Weimar Protocol reserved its most explosive and clinically exact finding for last. It was a revelation that transcended these three male archetypes and indicated a biological mechanism within women themselves. The researchers dissecting the age demographics of the divorce and abandonment surges noticed a pattern that could not be clarified by economics or politics alone. There was a distinct and dramatic clustering of female-initiated separations around a very specific age range, 38 to 42. They named this phenomenon patron and de-revolt, the matron S revolt. This was not the impulsive branch swinging of a young woman in her 20s. This was something far more deliberate, far more absolute, and far more catastrophic to the social structure, as it often entailed the breakup of families with children. The matron's revolt is the ultimate expression of the female exit strategy, and comprehending it is the master key to the entire Weimar thesis. The researchers propose that this period signifies a critical biological and psychological crossroads. It is the final stop before the conclusion of the reproductive line. A woman at this age is confronting the undeniable dusk of her fertility. The attention she once received as a young woman starts to diminish. She examines her life at her husband, who is frequently one of the three susceptible archetypes, and she is hit by a terrifying primal question. Is this everything? The man who was an adequate provider at 30, a passable enough partner, now appears as the warden of her unlived life. The faithful hound now seems not just tedious, but an anchor, hindering her from one last desperate voyage for excitement and validation. The damaged warrior is no longer a project, but a load she no longer possesses the youth or vitality to bear. The moral architect is no longer a foundation, but a prison barrier. The Weimar files are saturated with heartbreaking case studies of the matron's revolt. Reflect on the story of a woman we'll call Helga, married for 18 years to a faithful, stable carpenter. They had 2 teenage children. Her life was the image of middle-class stability. But at 40, Helga, faced with her fading youth, started a secret affair with a younger, impoverished artist she encountered at a gallery. She did not depart for money, she departed for sensation, she told the researchers. I looked at my husband, at his comfortable belly and his predictable habits, and I saw my own death. With Stefan I feel vibrant. I feel wanted. I feel like a woman again, not just a mother. She shattered her family to feed this last desperate craving for meaning. The data demonstrated that women undergoing the matroness revolt were disproportionately prone to engage in what we would now label branch swinging. They secured a new partner or the tangible assurance of one before departing the old. This was not a leap of faith. It was a strategic transfer. The initial euphoria of her new affair is intoxicating, a powerful drug that dulls the shame of betraying her family. It is a shock to the system of everyone around her who cannot fathom how the reliable mother and wife could suddenly become so self-centered, so rash. But from the viewpoint of the protocol, it was entirely predictable. It was the climax of a lifetime of hyperemus programming activated by the biological alarm clock of declining value. This is the ultimate betrayal because it originates from a place of established history and shared hardship. It is the betrayal that shatters not just a man's heart, but his entire comprehension of the world, leaving him to gather the fragments of a family destroyed by a revolt he never anticipated. The sobering, if grim, truth that the Weimar Protocol provides is that this revolt is not a mystery. It is not a unique catastrophe. It is a foreseeable event, and like any foreseeable event, it can be anticipated. The men who survived it in Weimar were not the ones who were surprised. They were the ones who comprehended the landscape. They were the men who refused to be classified into the three archetypes of susceptibility. They were the men who constructed lives so dynamic, so compelling, and so grounded in their own mission that they remained the most fertile branch long after the others had started to decay. The lesson of Weimar is not one of hopelessness, but a brutal, unyielding clarity. It is a summons for men to awaken from the fairy tale of unconditional loyalty and to forge themselves into a force so undeniable that departure becomes for her an inconceivable calculation. The evidence has spoken.